After being unwell for quite some time, on advice and recommendation of his doctor, Professor Connery traveled to the small town of Undredal, Norway. Why don't you take a trip somewhere away from home for a change? It will help you recover. Perhaps you will enjoy visiting Undredal. It's my hometown. Close by the fjord, he booked into a small hotel. Not a lot of people lived here. It was a quiet and peaceful town. Every morning, Professor Connery went out for a walk by the cliffside, enjoying the fresh air. The weather had been gloomy for the past few days, and today, since dawn, it had been pouring. Late in the afternoon, Professor Connery sat out in the lobby's cafe, having a hot cup of tea and krumkaka cookies, when he suddenly heard a voice behind him. "Hello, Professor. I hope you wouldn't mind me joining you." "No, please do." The young woman smiled as she sat opposite to him. "I'm Joanna Kurkova. My father is the owner of this hotel. I recently got news of your staying here from Dr. Kayland. He's quite well known in this town. He's asked of me to make sure you're doing well." "Is that so? Dr. Kayland is quite a strange man. Instead of giving me medicine, he sent me here for a change from the busy city life in America so I can recover my health." "Has your health improved?" I guess he was right. Joanna smiled, taking a pause for a while, before she finally spoke out. "Professor, I understand you're here for your recovery, but when I heard about you from Dr. Kayland, I really wanted to discuss something personal with you. It's about my father." "Sure." "I actually don't live here in Undredal. I'm married, I have children, and I live with my family in the city. In fact, my father didn't used to stay here either. After my mother passed away, I didn't have any other siblings. It was just me and my father. I grew up in his care. My father is a businessman. He has a few hotels in the city, and this hotel here. It was after my marriage, because of his loneliness, he bought this hotel and a bungalow, and sometimes used to come here. But it was much long ago. Due to handling business in the city, he stopped coming here. But about a year ago, some issues arose concerning the payment of this property, and he had to come here, and ever since, he has fallen ill. When I heard of his condition, I traveled here to care for him." "That's quite odd. I came here to recover, and your father came here and fell ill. How can anyone get sick living in this beautiful atmosphere?" "Professor, perhaps this is not a physical sickness. He's being haunted by something." "Haunted? And how have you come to this conclusion?" "I've seen it myself, Professor. I was staying at my father's bungalow one night when I saw a dark figure standing by the edge of my bed. I haven't stayed there since, and I've told my father to come stay at this hotel or at a nursing home, but he refuses to leave the bungalow. There's something there." "Have you shown him to the doctors?" "The doctors are pretty hopeless. They say he's lost his mind. My father is always paranoid. He's always frightened by something. He doesn't like staying in the dark, and these days, he's been having difficulty recognizing anyone. He doesn't want to meet or speak to anyone. Is it okay if I visit your father?" "Actually, Professor, I wanted to request you, but I was hesitant asking you of a favor when you've come to recover your health." "It's all right. It's not a problem." When the rain lessened to a drizzle, Joanna brought her car out, while Professor Connery walked out on his cane. "Is it a walkable distance?" "It's a 20 minutes walk, but it's raining and the roads have become muddy." "That's fine. I'd like to walk there, take in some fresh air." It was near sunset, and the skies had started to darken. "Did your father ever consider marriage after your mother's demise?" "No, he was close to my mother. Ever since her death, he's always had this guilt for having been overwhelmed with his business when he was married to her." "Was it a natural death?" "My mother had a weak heart. Her death was rather sudden, but it wasn't unexpected." As Professor Connery neared the bungalow, he looked at a single room to the left, lit bright. "That must be your father." "Yes." When Joanna escorted Professor Connery inside, he suddenly felt a strange chill. He put on his glasses and told her, Don't tell your father who I am. If he asks you, tell him I'm a guest at the hotel, and I seek to buy the hotel." Professor Connery followed her inside. There on the bed lay the old man. He looked at them, a bit confused. "You?" Professor Connery took a seat opposite to him. "Hello, Mr. Kurkova. You don't know me, but I'm a guest at your hotel." "Hello. I hope you don't mind lowering the light. I have a condition with my eyes." Joanna nodded, but her father suddenly became a bit anxious. "Don't turn off all the lights. I'll light a candle, father." Joanna lit a candle and placed it by the window beside Professor Connery. But just as Professor Connery took off his glasses, he mistakenly, or not so mistakenly, dropped the candle over. Joanna became a bit worried as her father repeatedly asked, "Turn on the light, Joanna, turn on the light." But Professor Connery ushered Joanna to stay put. "I ask of the spirit inhabiting this home, show yourself." In just moments, the room suddenly became cold. A heavy gust of wind pushed the windows open. At once, the swirling winds encompassed the room. Joanna froze as she saw a figure of a young boy walk out from the darkness behind Professor Connery. Her father stared at the boy in fear, quiet. "Who are you, and why are you here? Are you here to play with me? Do you like playing games? What do you want from this old man?" "I like to play games. I just want to play with him." "Can't you see he doesn't want to play with you?" As soon as the words escaped Professor Connery's mouth, the entity became furious.
"No, he has to play with me."
Professor Connery felt a heavy force as the chair toppled over, and so did he. Joanna yelled out in fright before she ran to turn the lights on. But with the brightness, her father fell unconscious, and the young boy was nowhere to be seen. "Professor, are you all right? It was a mistake bringing you here." "I'm fine. See if your father's all right." Joanna rushed to shake her father, breathing out in relief when he opened his eyes. After arranging everything for him, Joanna and Professor Connery headed back to the hotel. "Professor, what was that?" "Joanna, are you hiding something from me?" "No, I've told you everything related to how this happened." After returning to the hotel, Professor Connery lay in bed, thinking about the boy. The following day, he decided to go out and investigate a little about Frederick Kurkova. There weren't many homes around this area apart from the hotel itself, but questioning a few locals, Professor Connery came to know of an orphanage nearby. So he went there to inquire. Is Frederick Kurkova associated with this orphanage in any way, or has he ever donated here? No, sir, he's never come here. Has any child recently passed away or gone missing from here? No, sir, all our children are healthy. This orphanage is very safe. After Professor Connery left the orphanage, he walked around the area, visiting the cliffside about a 10-minute distance away. He then headed towards Kurkova's bungalow and inspected the area around there. As it neared evening, he stopped by the cliffside near the bungalow. He took in the fresh air, looking out at the waters below, trying to understand everything Joanna had told him about her father. Feeling a bit weary, he decided to hike down to the waters. It was around 7 p.m. when Professor Connery returned to the hotel and called for Joanna. Good evening, Professor. Good evening, Joanna. I'd like to visit your father again tonight. Professor, are you sure it's a good idea after everything that happened? Last time, I wasn't prepared. It was around 9 p.m. that Joanna took Professor Connery to meet her father again. They sat in the dark room in the light of the candle. What are you doing? Don't worry, everything will be fine. Strangely, the night was silent and peaceful. Professor Connery took out a small toy truck from his pocket. He spun it around as a soft tune began to play, and he placed it beside the candle. Joanna became startled as she heard the voice of the child from the darkness across the room. "Are you here to play with me today?" "No, son, I'm not here to play with you, but I found your toy. I know what happened with you. Is there any way you can forgive your grandfather?" Joanna couldn't understand what Professor Connery was talking about. Her father didn't have any children but her. How could this be his grandson? "I'm not angry at Grandpapa. I love him. I just want to play with him. I want to be with him all the time." "Son, I know what you crave. You crave love." Professor Connery turned to Joanna. "Joanna, this is your son." "My son?" The boy turned to look at Joanna when suddenly the look in his eyes changed. He slowly stepped out of the darkness and took the toy truck in his hands. Before he walked to her, "Are you really my mother? Why did you leave me at the orphanage?" "I did not." "I thought about you all the time. Did you think about me?" Looking into the innocence of the young boy's eyes, Joanna began to tear up, but just when she went to wrap her arms around him, the boy vanished, and the toy truck fell to the ground. As Professor Connery turned on the light, Joanna turned to her father in rage. He sat there still, staring at her as she yelled at him. "Father, how could you do this? How could you do this to me?" "Joanna, calm down. He's no more." Joanna fell silent as Professor Connery closed Frederick's eyes. "Joanna, I asked you, but you didn't tell me. But I understand. It wasn't your fault. You don't know what your father did." It was nearly 10 years ago when Frederick Kurkova was living in the city with his only daughter, Joanna, that he discovered she was pregnant. She was only 16 at the time. Frederick couldn't bear that his daughter bring shame upon herself and on their family. However, it was too late for anything to be done about the pregnancy. Frederick kept the pregnancy a secret, but the night the child was born, he kept a darker secret from his own daughter. The child was stillborn. In truth, Frederick brought this grandson of his to the small town of Undredal, far from the city, far from their lives, where he made arrangements for the boy at the orphanage. There, he paid the staff to keep the identity of the child a secret. Meanwhile, Joanna moved on and got married. Frederick bought a hotel in this town and a bungalow, since he often visited his grandson. He cared for him and played with him, but as the child grew up, he wished to stay with his grandfather. "I want to stay with my grandpapa. Where is my grandpapa?" Every time Frederick came to meet him, the boy questioned him about his mother. "Grandpapa, where's my mother?" Things had started to become difficult for Frederick in this age. He couldn't care for this child. He feared lest the secret come out and they be shamed because of him. It was one of these days that Frederick took the boy out for a walk by the cliffside near his bungalow. "I got you a new toy." "Wow, an ice cream truck? Thank you, Grandpapa." That day, as Frederick played with his grandson, he had done something despicable. It wasn't pre-planned, but at the moment, he just did it. That very night, Frederick left for the city and never returned to Undredal, until he had to return on an urgent business trip to the hotel. That night, while he was sleeping in his room, he woke up to a soft whisper by his ear. "Grandpapa, I was waiting for you forever, and you finally came." Frederick was horrified to see the grandson he had taken the life of standing in front of him. Every night, when he turned the lights off to sleep, he saw him. He was haunted by him. Frederick feared to stay in the darkness. He feared seeing the boy, but he knew he earned this. Out of his guilt, he confined himself to this bungalow and sometimes even turned the lights off himself, so the spirit of this innocent child could torture him. When Professor Connery spoke to the boy the first night, he sensed something wicked had happened. That evening, when he stood by the cliffside, he had a vision of what he feared to be the truth. And when he went down by the fjord, he discovered what remained of the boy. That's when Professor Connery returned to the bungalow, reuniting the soul of the innocent boy to his mother. After many years, not only did his soul meet peace, but Frederick and Joanna had also gotten closure. The following day, a funeral was held for Frederick Gurkova. But standing there amongst the locals, Professor Connery couldn't spot Joanna. Perhaps it was time he too should return home. But it was on his way out, when he stopped by the register, the management handed him a letter from Joanna. Professor Connery, I can't thank you enough for all that you've done. This is but a small gesture of gratitude that you stay here free of payment. I hope for you to return to Undredal whenever you please. A room will always be available for you. Take care, Joanna.
Click on the subscribe button and check out more awesome videos on our channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon because you know it's interesting.